Hello, my name's Alana. We're here on behalf of the Social Nexus Society to do a talk with our guest Andy.
And I'm Fiona, and I'm also part of the Social Nexus Society. And we're here today to have some very important questions. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, good. I'm Andy Marshall. I'm the chairperson of the Justice for the Cardiff 5 campaign. Had a long history of working with them, also a long history as a political activist. I work now in training mostly in the field of mental well-being and in inclusion, diversity and equality as an area which is under much attack,
Yeah,
but which is still really, really important.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
That's
for
all
your
right.
time. For those who may be unfamiliar, maybe studying different courses, can you define miscarriage of justice and explain what that means?
Okay, so in common terms, it's basically when someone has gone through the justice system and it turns out that they were wrongfully convicted and they're eventually released. That's the theory. The term miscarriage of justice actually goes back to the 17th century. Miscarriage in the sense of a mistake of justice. I don't think it's a good term anymore. Sure, there are mistakes, genuine mistakes. I think there are three different types of wrongful convictions. There is the type where there is genuinely some kind of mistake. It's not the intention of the criminal justice system to harm this person, but something's been overlooked, someone has not found the evidence, they've misinterpreted something, and that is a genuine mistake. Still, people should be held responsible for that, though. Then there's a category which is sometimes called the noble cause corruption,
Yeah.
where the police basically they convince they've got the right person, they can't quite get the evidence, so they will create it.
Right.
Still corruption, but the intent was to get the person that they really believe has done it. Then there's a third category. The police, well, not necessarily the whole criminal justice system, but the police know that this is not the right person, and yet they want to get them for whatever reason. So it's a carriage of injustice rather than miscarriage of justice. That's what the Cardiff 5 was, and many others as well.
Yeah.
Right. I understand you're heavily involved in campaigning for justice on behalf of the Cardiff 5.
Yeah.
Can you explain your role and how you first got involved with that campaign?
Yeah. Can I tell the story of it
course.
and where I fitted into that
Yes.
story? Just in case people don't know about
Yes.
the history of the Cardiff 5. It means going back to 1988 and the murder of a young woman called Lynette White in a horrible, seedy little flat in Butte Town, the docks area of Cardiff. Lynette was a sex worker. And that is relevant because actually it turned out it was one of her punters who murdered her. But it was awful at the time because all it became was prostitute Lynette White. That she was dehumanised. And I guess for many people it puts it into their head, oh well, she deserved it. And she was a wonderful human being. She had aspirations and plans, and she was a lovely human being by all accounts. I never met her. She was murdered. The police had one piece of evidence to go on, which is that several witnesses had seen a man, a white man, with blood on his hands, in a real state of distress, very close to the flat where she was murdered. So that was quite a strong piece of evidence. So strong that they put out a photo fit of this man on Crime Watch. Everyone around the country saw this man, and they hunted him for 8 months, found absolutely nothing, and then their whole investigation completely changed direction, and they started bringing in local people. They brought in hundreds of local men, predominantly black and mixed race, because that is the area, that is the docks area, an incredible mix of different cultures. And what they did over the following months is they honed it down to 5 men who none of them knew each other. They had nothing to do with each other. They weren't even friends, but they wanted to fit them into this story. And then what they created, the whole story, which was a ridiculous story involving kind of ritualistic murder with people being forced to, sorry to do that, but forced to stab. And the way they created that story was to force confessions. So they forced a confession out of Stephen Miller, who had an IQ of 74. And we now know how confessions like that happen. They forced witnesses to give false statements. They went about piecing together this story. So the 5 of them went to court in Swansea, a hostile place for 5 black men at that time, you understand. All white jury, very little multiculturalism in Swansea back in the late 1980s. The day before the judge was due to sum up, a year after the trial started, he died. He died. And they had to do it all over again. So the trial started again with an all-white jury. And so the men were in remand for 2 years leading up to the conclusion of the second trial. And at that trial, 2 of the men were acquitted. John Actie and Ronnie Actie were acquitted, and 3 men were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. And I'll just give you the names. It's Tony Paris, Yusuf Abdullahi and Stephen Miller were found guilty. This is where I come in the story, because immediately a campaign began. The Docks community, Butetown, is a very strong community. They were not going to take this lying down. They started a campaign called Free the Cardiff 3. There's some confusion sometimes. Is it Cardiff 3, Cardiff 5? Well, it was Free the Cardiff 3 because 3 of them had been in prison. I'll come on to why it's now the Cardiff 5 in a bit. And I joined that campaign. I made a big banner. You might see on some of the material from that time, a big banner with the 3 faces of the men on it and so on. Became very close with Lloyd and Malik, who were the brothers of Tony Paris and Yusuf. They were their brothers. And we worked tirelessly to get them out. And they did. They did come out. They were released on appeal in 1992. And we all thought, brilliant, we've done it, that's it. But it wasn't.
No.
That was the beginning of it. So I've talked a long time. Is there anything you wanted to hone? There's lots more to the story, but if there's anything you wanted to hone in on.
It's absolutely brilliant, and it was the longest. I think it might have just been overtaken trial in miscarriage of justice in the whole of the UK, which I think is insanity. But I was kind of wondering, as in like now, present day, what is something that you're really passionate about? As I know that was quite a long time ago. What in current days?
Yeah, that's interesting because it was a long time ago. I was involved in left-wing politics at the time. I was a member of an organisation called the Marxist Party, and that's how I got involved in that. But the key thing that brought me back to it was Tony Paris died. I should explain that of those 5 men, only 2 of them are left alive. 3 of them died, and they all died because of the impact of the trauma that they'd experienced. You understand, the trauma wasn't only their 2 years on remand. For 3 of them, their 2 years in prison. It was what it was like when they came out. The police continued to insinuate and state that they had actually done it. And they were abused on the street, they were attacked, and that their whole community was divided by what had happened. Had a massive impact on them. 2 of them died at the age of 49. Tony Paris made it to 65 and then died 2 years ago. And it was his funeral. I saw that he died. I thought, I've got to go to this. And I went to the funeral, saw Lloyd, still with his dreads, but now grey. And thinking, would he even recognise me? Because I must look similarly much older. And he saw me and he said, "You made the banner. You made the." And I just knew in that moment that making of that banner was so significant. He said, "You made the banner. Someone stole it, and I want you to make another one." And we got talking, met up with John Actie, who was there as well, and we just decided. And Kervin Julian, another big campaigner, and we decided we've got to get this going again. Because no justice has been had. They may have been released. No justice has been had for them. In fact, completely the opposite, maintenance of injustice right through. I'll come back to the police that. But this time, it's not the Cardiff 3, it's the Cardiff 5, because all 5 of those men were severely impacted and traumatised by this.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you can tell I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
Because even though this was back in 1990, the reason why we're campaigning now is because that kind of injustice continues.
Yeah.
Different forms, but it continues, and people still go to prison absolutely set up knowing that they hadn't actually done it. So, and there's still a large element of racism in the way that the police handle things now, as it absolutely was back then. So it's not a piece of history. It's history which lives in today, and that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think we have a society that is scared at the minute. We have a society that needs the perceived strength of the police and the court system. And I think people are too scared to explore different avenues and explore different ways that aren't just like sort of realism and zero tolerance. Because that feels comfortable to British people. Yeah. That feels right to the general population. And that's why it's so important that we talk to our family, we talk to our friends, we raise things like this. Yeah. Because if we continue to try to reform, or even trying to get them to admit that they have failed as institutions, is extremely difficult. I know now you're campaigning for a judicial review of the Cardiff 5 case, and a lot of cases going back and up until is it Joe Feta in 2016, a review of all of those miscarriages of justice. It's so difficult to get them to admit to those things. Yeah. That where we go from there, I feel like we run ourselves out as like campaigners and as activists, trying to get them to admit that they've done wrong. Yeah. And it's about where do we go from here? And it's mainly about increasing consciousness. We need to be aware as a society. We need to have these talks.
Can I just pick up a couple of things you said there? No, absolutely. The immediate response of all police, particularly, is that absolute defensism. You saw it with the Ely riots. Yeah. When those 2 lads were killed, whatever the background of those lads, their immediate response was to lie. They just blatantly lied, and they got Alan Michael to lie on their behalf to say, we weren't chasing them. Yes, they were. They just had to do a detour because the boys had gone through a bit that they couldn't take the van round. And they just lied and lied. If they had at that point come out and told the truth, they might have stood some chance of building a bit of trust with the community.
Yeah. Can you just explain why the Ely riots happened quickly, if that's okay?
Yeah, no, sure, of course. So basically, I should explain a little bit about Ely, first of all. Ely is one of the most socio-economically deprived areas of Cardiff, and has been for a long time. It's perhaps slightly better now, but it's still the place where people are either sent when they're pushed out of other areas, which happens a lot, of course, as areas are gentrified and so on. Or, of course, you've got people who've lived there very happily for generations, and that, there's a strong community there. 2 boys were on e-bikes that apparently they had gone up towards the police and taunted them. They were, how old were they? 13, something like that. Of course, these boys went up and taunted the police because of the whole history of antagonism with the police. Because I should say this was not the first Ely riot. Yeah. There's been a history of riots there. So the police in a van started chasing them on these e-bikes. And the boys scooted off as quickly as they could. As I say, the police couldn't follow them directly, but there is door cam after door cam footage of this van chasing these boys. And then they had to take a detour. They came back round. They continued chasing them. Basically, the boys both died. Yeah. They crashed and they died. In a sense, you could ask, well, what was the purpose of chasing them? What was all? But the point was that they just completely lied and tried to deny all responsibility, and that's what caused the riot. Yeah. Plus the fact that they cordoned off the area where these boys lay dead and refused to let their families in. there may be protocols, but if they had just let their families in to show that basic human decency, that would have stopped the crowds gathering and getting angrier and angrier and angrier.
Yeah. It really is a pattern. It's very similar to the London riots, and also similar to a lot of other miscarriage of justice cases, like Annette Hewins, because she was from a very impoverished area, the Gurnall's estate, I think.
Yes, it was,
and it's pretty much the same thing. These people, by our institutions that we should trust and believe in, are just completely screwed over.
Yeah.
Time after time after time. And I think that there's a real lack of knowledge about that, about some of the things that are going on in Wales specifically. With the police department, particularly South Wales Police Department, has such an insanely high rate of miscarriages of justice. And we've had so many conversations about this, and it's insane to me.
Can I take that opportunity just to come back to what happened with the police after the Cardiff Five? So first of all, they were released. The police wanted to just close the investigation down because they wanted to portray it that actually they got off on a technicality. And actually the appeal kind of compounded that, because what happened at their appeal is that Michael Mansfield, who's you may know of as a fantastic barrister who's supported many miscarriage of justice cases, he insisted that the court listened to the full tapes of Stephen Miller's interviews. And what he showed over 17 tapes was the way in which they had, but I would put it, I wouldn't hold back from saying tortured this man. They tortured him, telling him again and again and again, you did it, Stephen, you did it, till he was absolutely exhausted, broken down, couldn't compute anything, and eventually regurgitated what they told. So Mike Mansfield insisted that the court heard all of this. The judge said, this is outrageous. I cannot believe this has happened. Boof, you're free. They never heard all the rest of it. Masses of other examples of how people were coerced into giving witness statements, alibi evidence completely ignored, etc. So the full truth never came out. So the police could portray this, that they'd got off on the technicality, that they had just interviewed him in the wrong way. So it was perpetuated for a long time. They didn't want to reinvestigate, but eventually they were forced to. And an amazing forensic scientist called Angela Gallup was brought in and did an incredible job recreating the flat where Lynette was murdered, etc., discovering new DNA samples, and they found that they got a full DNA sample. And then through painstaking investigation, they matched it eventually through a very long, and they found the real killer, a man called Jeffrey Gaffor, who remarkably, not remarkably at all, looked just like the photo fit that they'd used at the beginning. So that was 2003. He went to prison. He's just been released. He's just been released on parole. I won't get into that. But sorry, I'll get on to the police. And then finally, in 2011, 11 or 12 of the officers who were involved in this finally were arrested and put on trial for corruption. So there was some hopes. John Actie from the very beginning said, there's no way they would. And he was absolutely right. Because what he saw was that if they did put these officers in prison, it would completely undermine the whole system. It would show, absolutely, you're talking about raising people's consciousness, it would show people, oh my God, we can't trust the police at all. And he knew it was never going to happen, and it didn't. The trial was collapsed on the basis that a piece of evidence had gone missing. The evidence itself was inconsequential, but it was to do with disclosure. And you remember. So they closed it down. They said, we've got to kick this out. The officers walked free, and then the piece of evidence turned up a couple of weeks later in an evidence box in a police station. I mean, you know, an inquiry after this concluded that there wasn't any malice involved in this. It was all human error. None of us believe that whatsoever. It had to happen that way. Otherwise, what you're talking about is the collapse of a complete system.
Yeah.
In fact, the police tried to use that police corruption trial as a way of reinforcing that these were actually the right men. In court, they tried to say that Geoffrey Gaffour had done it, but these guys had done it with him.
Mm-hmm.
And they were constantly trying to put them back on trial.
Yeah.
And even after the police corruption thing collapsed, they still continue to try to get across the idea that John Actie, Tony Parris, who was still alive at that point, had really been involved. The others were dead by that point, of course.
Yeah. But I do think a statistic we found that kind of links to all of this is that black defendants' sentences are so much longer than white defendants, 8 to 12 months longer.
Yeah.
And that is a Welsh statistic.
Yeah.
It is very insane to me. And that's recent. That was from 2010 to 2022.
Yeah. And there's another element to that. Black prisoners are much more likely to do the full sentence or longer sentences when they're in prison as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only explanation is prejudice.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think there's anything that we can do? Because obviously you train in diversity and equality. Is there anything you're doing at the minute that you think can change that?
I don't get to reach High Court judges, magistrates, or now prison officers. I did used to work in prisons and work with some prison officers. I can just say, some prison officers are absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Their interest is the welfare of the prisoners and getting them through this and getting them out and never seeing them again. Absolutely genuinely. And I do believe that some police officers are exactly the same. They've joined up to serve the community, and they do. But they're working all of them in a system that is exactly the opposite of that. So, can I come back to something you said earlier? You said about raising consciousness. Raising consciousness is important, but for me, all of the work that is done on trying to change society for the better focuses on raising consciousness. And it doesn't work by itself. Because all that happens is people start to get more aware. Oh, that's awful. Oh, that's awful. And then nothing practical changes, and people get more and more cynical, and they do less and less.
Yeah.
So the raising awareness and consciousness is important, but only if it is accompanied by changing structures. As the Marxist in me says, and what underpins the structures, it's the whole economy.
Yes.
And we have to come back to capitalism.
Yeah.
We have to, because capitalism drives the penal system, it drives the education to prison pipeline, and I'm very familiar with that, having been a teacher and then working in prisons. It drives it all, and it also requires it.
Yeah.
It requires this constant stream of criminals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially because it's got all the private companies involved who make all the money out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, I'm getting on a rant now. Just like it requires the constant stream of students.
Yeah.
No, you know, listen, when I went to university, maybe a third of people went to university from my school, less than that. And then it's become industrialised. Let's get as many students through as we can. We'll build huge empires of capital around it. The universities have all turned into businesses now.
Yeah.
And then there's a student accommodation, and of course
Private
the loan
accommodation.
companies,
Yeah.
all of that. And then most of them come out. Did you know that the UK has the most overqualified workforce in Europe?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really hoping that you end up in good work, but you might end up in McDonald's.
Yeah. Yeah. To be fair, that is
Sorry, that's a real rant, but it's just about how
That's why it's important we reach people in university and also start raising awareness isn't enough.
Yes, I think that's sort of the point that I want to bounce off on, and not to sound like too much of a cynic myself.
Yeah.
But I wonder, in your opinion, how do you, for lack of a better word, capitalize off of moments of public interest?
Yeah.
And what do you think is the best way to take that sort of motivation from groups of people who aren't engaged, right, like us every day, and tunnel that into something productive? That's because good, I think personally, not to project, I think there's a fine line between feeling like you're in some way exploitative yourself there.
Yeah.
From trying to bounce off that, but I'm just not sure how else you get the ball rolling.
I'm not. I don't mean to sound like I'm belittling the importance of raising consciousness.
Yes.
The problem is that in itself, it doesn't affect change.
Exactly.
Societal change.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I can't give you some specific examples of that. And I'm just going to reference Mike Mansfield that I mentioned earlier. So Mike Mansfield has worked for, 50 years in this field. He was part of freeing the Guildford 4, the Birmingham 6, the Cardiff 5, many of them. And he has now reached what you could call a very cynical point, where he no longer believes in public inquiries and in all of the state-organised institutions of supposedly establishing justice. He still takes part in them, but he knows that what will happen with that kind of thing is that, first of all, it'll be put off and off and off for years, sometimes in the hope that people will die before it comes to actually fruition. And then it'll spend ages, sometimes years deliberating on it, and then it will come up with some recommendations that are just ignored.
Yeah.
That's the very cynical view of it, but that's what he's seen. His latest book is called The Power in the People, Not the People in Power.
Yeah.
And what he's come to believe is that actually what affects change is ordinary people doing things that the state cannot ignore.
Yeah.
And that means those moments that you say where people are angered. And then we've had one very recently, haven't we, with the post office inquiry?
Yeah.
Where, you see, one of the frustrations we have in the Cardiff 5 is it's much harder to get people to get angry about something like the Cardiff 5, partly because it was a long time ago, partly because they were all involved in crime and they were bad boys. They just weren't murderers, and partly, I have to say, because they're black and mixed race.
Yeah.
The post office, these were sorry, that's demeaning. They were
the poster children.
Yeah, they were the heart of the community and good people. They genuinely are, and yet they were subjected to this kind of injustice. But and so there was all the inquiry and all of that, and people were outraged by it. But what really sparked off the outrage and the action was that ITV programme.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Even my grandmother watched it.
Absolutely.
She, like many of our grandparents in our generation, are sometimes more conservative, and she still watched it.
Absolutely horrified. She was, wasn't she?
Yeah, horrified.
And like, oh my goodness, I didn't know this was possible.
Yeah.
And what the action that produced, or one of them that was really, really good, was the amount of people that signed a petition to get what you call, names going out my head now, the woman who had been in charge of the post office at the time, to get her stripped of her MBE or whatever it was. And they couldn't ignore that. Normally they'd have just ignored this pressure, hoped it'd go away. They will put up with a lot of shouting.
Yeah.
And they'll keep their heads down. They'll get sick of it.
Yeah.
But this led to some action. Now I want to bring this to the Cardiff 5, because we've banged on for a long time about this. It's very difficult to get the passion, to get the emotion. We're hoping that will change soon, because one of our Cardiff 5 campaign members, a fantastic journalist called Kerry Jackson, has just finished a new book about the case. It's called The Boy from Tiger Bay. It will be available on Amazon from May. I was very lucky to get an advance copy and have read it, and it's fantastic. It's unlike any other account, because it not only is exhaustive in its exploration of the facts and the evidence, it tells the story, and it tells it in an emotional way that helps you connect with that. It tells it through John Actie's eyes in many ways, so it's a kind of personal story as well. It's going to be turned into a TV programme and potentially a movie. I can't say any more about that because it's under negotiation, but with an amazing director, if they get it, and an amazing writer, and it's heading that way. So what we're hoping is that this will bring it into people's living rooms, like you say, and Gran will watch it, and your kids will watch it.
Yeah.
You know, young people will watch it, and that we want to try and capitalise on that when it does happen, to get that emotional drive to really push for people to demand that action is taken.
Yeah.
You know.
I wanted to join on from when you were talking about the power that we have as ordinary people. I know a lot of us were very online around 2020 to 2022.
Oh, yes.
And the online activism really did skyrocket about Black Lives Matter, or All Lives Matter, depending on where you sat with that.
Yeah.
And that was insane. It felt like everyone was so connected and so involved in activism, even if it was resharing posts on everyone's Instagram stories, even people that you'd look at in class the next day on Zoom and think, really, you know about this? Like you're involved in this. And that disappeared. That has disappeared because now we see there was so much drive for George Floyd, and then also there was like the flip side of that when it looked at I can't remember her name. Maybe it was Brianna or something. When they were looking at how females and sort of a more intersectional view of how Black women are treated by the police. That was insane. That everyone knew about that and was really passionate about that, and it's kind of died out now. And like we previously mentioned, we've had these reports.
I wonder what the missing link is, right? What the missing link is between the outrage and the anger and turning that into something tangible.
Like living room to
exactly, right? It's because how do you turn outrage from a riot on the street into something tangible? How do you turn social media virality? How do you turn,
and
the
even
Sunday
when
program
it does
into
get to protesting, I went to a lot and live near Nottingham, and I attended the Black Lives Matter protest, the rec round, and that was extremely moving, and there was not any violence that I witnessed personally. Obviously I can't speak for everyone's experience, but there was a lot of poetry, a lot of emotional speeches, there was a lot of just community and idea sharing, and it was really moving, and it was incredible. And then obviously you can Google it now and there will just be nothing on that, and stuff on like the police presence that was there, and it doesn't speak to how powerful it was. So I think what is important is that we keep doing this, because yes, I know since 2020 everything's changed a little bit in terms of like how much time we are spending on our phones, but I just think that movements like that, please get involved.
Persistence is essential, and it can be really hard. I mean, I know this, and I know other members of our campaign who get absolutely ground down and dispirited because of the apparent lack of progress. I'm someone who likes things to happen quickly. Kerry Jackson keeps telling me it takes time, Andy. You've got to persist, and we do, and then we have to look for the moments. Can I just go back to something you said earlier on about us living in fear? I want to just flip that, and we're lots of us are living in fear, but I think the people who are living in the most fear are actually the establishment.
Wow. Right.
And no, I do. I think they are shitting themselves. Because the cracks are opening up in this edifice of criminal justice. The Casey report started opening that up. I know this for certain within South Wales Police, because I've met them and talked to them. There are people who are absolutely committed to justice and to getting the Cardiff 5, justice for the Cardiff 5. And these are senior people. I know how hard they will have to push. They might not last, they might give up. But the cracks are opening up, and I think we have to keep our momentum, because there will come times where we can open up those cracks even further. And they won't be able to just brush things under the carpet and so on. Mike O'Brien's case of I know you're going to talk to Mike about this, about the bed and board. Bed and board, the fact that the state charges people who were wrongly convicted for the time that they spent in prison, and does not charge people who were rightly convicted. Well, rightly is in inverted commas, because a lot of the people that are convicted shouldn't be in prison. And that potentially is a moment. Mike got a massive response to that. Again, who couldn't look at that and say, that is ridiculous, that's unjust.
Exactly.
And Mike is fighting it through the courts and he's getting massive pushback on that, but he's persisting, we're persisting, and there will come a point, we hope, where we can say, right, look, let's really use this to get action from people, because the understanding is there, let's get some action from people, you know?
Yeah, I think my message would be like, don't be scared, because things are happening anyway. Whether you know about them or not, these bad things are occurring, and there is no point in ignoring it. Equally is like, if you're a student like us and you're very involved in things like that, take breaks, take time for yourself to learn about something nice that's going on in the world. I will just say there are good things happening as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I would say if you're scared, that's fine. You should be, and I do think that's an amazing perspective to have, that they're more scared than us.
What they work on is learned helplessness.
Yes.
You must have done this in psychology.
Yeah.
If they've created conditions where people cannot escape, they feel completely powerless and unable to do it, they're much less likely to take action in the future. And they rely absolutely on that. Some of it is by force. We'll go in and literally batten these people and scare them to death. Yeah. Some of it is by just long drawn out, we'll just let this sit for a long time until people give up. And that's what they want. That's why we can't do it. We've got to persist. And I think that's a really nice thing that you said, the moments where people come together with particular historical, political circumstances, and something big can happen.
Yeah.
So this is the revolutionary coming out here again.
It's coming out in all of us a little bit.
How can people get involved with the Cardiff 5 campaign as you did?
No, absolutely. Well, the most direct way is to go to our website, and it's a membership organisation. People can sign up. You can pay a contribution towards the campaign if you want. You don't have to. You can sign up, and then you'll become part of our circle when we organise things. People will know about it. We'll keep people updated. They can show support. So that's the most direct way.
Yeah. Like you did, make the banner. You know.
Yes, indeed. No, absolutely. And the main thing we need is bodies, people on, because. Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, we go to demonstrations. We haven't been for a little while, but we need a contingent of people who are there for our campaign. You know, and leafleting and whatever else we might do. But yes, it'd be great if people could sign up and have a look at the website. There's loads of really, really good stuff on there.
Yeah, well, they can't ignore us forever, you know. And even if it is, you just sign Michael O'Brien's Ben Board campaign. He was part of the Cardiff Newsagent Free, just a little circle back, to get his money recompensated, which was £37,000 that he had taken off of him for being wrongly imprisoned. That's outrageous. That is outrageous. So even if it's these small things like that, and having a nice coffee with your friend, having a chat, keep the community, keep communities alive, keep positive, and just do what you can with what you have. That's the main takeaway, I guess.
And persist.
Yeah.
Show up and persist. Exactly. Yeah.